Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today, we'll be discussing how social media can be used as a powerful platform for those who advocate the truth about Israel and those who want to defend the Jewish community. Warm welcome to the programme. My guest today is Ollie Anisfeld. He is the founder of JTV, which is a global Jewish online TV channel found on Facebook and YouTube. Ollie, absolute pleasure to have you on today's Middle East Report.
Fantastic to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Simon.
It's a pleasure. And can you give something about your Jewish background, being brought up here in the Jewish community, and your family background as well?
Yeah, sure. So I was brought up in a North London traditional Jewish household. I went to a non-Jewish school, actually, in North London. I became more interested in my Jewish identity around sort of age 12, 13, when I was in the lead up to my bar mitzvah. I had a really inspiring teacher, started learning alongside most Jewish boys will sort of read from the Torah and they'll learn quite a significant amount of Hebrew words and the tunes to read it. But alongside that, they'll learn, fundamental Jewish ideas and principles, hopefully. And so that kind of really stuck with me, and different messages that we learned from the weekly reading of the Torah had a bit of a impact on me. Then when I was 16, 17 years old, I started to read more, learn more, engage more with my Jewish identity, being more involved in the Jewish society at school. A real turning point for me was when I went to Poland when I was 17 years old. I just saw the extent of suffering and intense hatred that existed among the Nazis, an intense desire to wipe out the Jews, and it seemed almost like a supernatural desire, especially when I was sort of standing in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and you see the extent of the extent to which they went, such a vast space, and the extent to which they went in order to annihilate the Jewish people. And then also just recognizing the sheer fact that, I was with a group of Jewish students who are still here, the remarkable story of Jewish survival. And I felt a deep responsibility to learn more about my Jewish faith, about my Jewish heritage. And I decided to go to a yeshiva in Israel, which is like a college of Jewish studies. And it's quite funny. I always was told by, people, my friends were very concerned. They said, oh, no, we're so worried, you're going to get there, you're going to get brainwashed, you'll come back a rabbi. And I said, no, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to come back. And so after that, I came back to London. I did come back, and I went to UCL. And at that point, I kind of went into the field of Jewish education, and we can talk a bit about how I got to JTV. Absolutely.
Well, that's my next question. What you've done with JTV in the last 18 months has been nothing less than absolutely remarkable. Very high quality productions, very informative, from anything to politics to philosophy to Jewish religion and various other controversial topics you cover as well. So can you tell us how you had the vision for JTV, which can be found on YouTube and also on Facebook?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. We're sort of like I was saying to your producer earlier, kindred spirits. We're kind of doing a similar thing. You're doing it for the Christian community. And my sense was, yes, I did see a gap in the market for a high-quality Jewish media channel. But I didn't just do it because there was a gap in the market. I start from the point of Jewish education. My concern, having come back from Israel, being in London, is that I could see among a lot of my peers that they weren't so connected and inspired to their Jewish heritage. Now that has serious long-term effects on the Jewish people and our Jewish continuity, just from a purely, just demographic level, but also on a spiritual level. As Jews, as Torah-believing Jews, we see our role as trying to bring humanity closer to God. That's been, our mission throughout history. 2,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago when Abraham was around, he was known as, the word Hebrew, Abraham was known as Ha'ivri. That means he was separate. He was distinct from everyone else. He was on one side, and the rest of the world was on the other side. He was this monotheist, and everyone else was pagan or polytheistic or didn't believe in God. And we find ourselves 3,000 years later, the majority of the world believing in the God of Abraham through either Christianity or Islam, the majority of the world believing in principles of the dignity of human life, of peace as an ideal, of social responsibility, of family values, things that even people of no faith would consider important. And I think they undoubtedly were first articulated and brought to the world through the Bible and through the Torah. And we've had this amazing impact, but the problem today is Jewish people aren't continuing the next chapter in enough numbers. And that is a spiritual problem. That's, I want the Jewish people to continue to be attached to their original mission statement. And so it starts off by I want to sort of reinvigorate the Jewish people and their determination to be committed to Torah and Torah values. And then from that place, we can then continue to change the world. That's my vision is it's not unambitious, but that's where it all starts from. And so JTV was saying, okay, there's clearly people, most people, especially young people, are taking on most of their information through social media. They're consuming most of their information that way. Hearts and minds can be changed through social media. It's said that elections are won and lost on social media. Islamists are radicalizing people through social media, through video media. And I thought, why aren't the Jewish community using this platform in an effective way? So about a year and a half ago, to cut a long story short, I set up JTV, the global Jewish channel, and I thought, let's not just make it educational, let's make it something that is really beyond that. It covers lots of different content. So we have Jewish wisdom, we have current affairs and politics, and we have light entertainment that's fun and young and engaging and entertaining. And the mission statement has been to inspire positive Jewish identity in young people and Israel identity. And not just for Jewish people, but for anyone else interested in learning about what the Jewish people are about.
Absolutely. So let's have a look now at some of the amazing work done by Ollie and his YouTube channel, JTV.
Welcome to Jewish Wisdom on JTV, the global Jewish channel.
I'm the atheist.
You're brain dead.
On the 8th night of Hanukkah, someone sent to me.
Isn't that correct?
I find it very offensive and hurtful when people belittle the Holocaust.
What inspired you specifically to set up the most successful global navigation app, Waze?
I hate traffic jams.
My Judaism is important to me, it always has been.
People now in modern times sing about the tikva or hatikva. Essentially what we're talking about is our freedom.
And do you just want to say Shabbat Shalom? Say Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. In an interview with Jewish TV in the last few days, she was pushed on whether she'd been offered a peerage.
Do you have political ambitions in the Labour Party?
Do I have political ambitions in the Labour Party?
It's always the same two words. It's complicated.
But does that mean you're going to vote for Hillary? Is that what you're saying?
No, I haven't given up on recruiting a third candidate.
What have you read about this? What's the best book you've read on this subject?
I haven't read great tomes on.
The problem is not territory, the problem is not occupation, the problem is not settlement.
Hi, I'm Alan Dershowitz, and I want you to click below the video and subscribe to JTV.
I hope you will enjoy and support and tell others about JTV.
There you go. Gives you a little bit of a taster of Ollie's programme, JTV. Ollie, what are some of the challenges that you've personally faced in launching such an ambitious project? Because obviously media, the cost of a studio, filming, getting all the content online, and then, as it were, feeding the beast with content all the time to keep the number of viewers and keep people active and informed and engaged.
Yeah, I mean, it no doubt has been a challenge. You know, I really compare it to when you're starting an organisation to like trying to lift a car off the ground. It is really difficult, and it's doubly difficult when you have, you know, it's one thing to start an organisation or a business, but this is one where everyone's watching you. Everyone can see how well it's doing. So you have that added pressure. And I really did feel a pressure. But every day, I actually felt gets easier because you're doing more and more to do a few things. Number one, develop a team and find the right people. And number two, figure out what content works, what content speaks to people. And the more content you do, the more you sort of fine-tune yourselves to get that balance that I'm always trying to get between what people want and what they like and what I want to give them. So that is the balance we've always kind of had to manage. Yeah, you know, there's certain rules that I've learned. Things have to be fast-paced, they've got to be quick, they've got to capture emotions, they've got to be entertaining, they've got to be gripping, they've got to be unique, original. And in terms of the, you know, the other side of it, funding it or fueling the beast, as you said, you know, we found ways of trying to, you know, I won't say that it hasn't been difficult, but there are ways that we've managed to, you know, deal with that. Number one is partnership content, partner with other organisations and make content with them. The other thing is, you know, we do seek donations. We ask people to, you know, if they're interested in helping us create content, if it's some maybe educational content, or if people have an interest in Israel content, pro-Israel content, then we say, look, you know, we are a registered charity. Maybe do you want to sponsor an episode for us? We can give you a list of our content that hasn't come out yet. Maybe you want to have your name in it, you know, sponsored by this. And I would, you know, obviously be delighted if any of your viewers have an interest. They can just go to our website and go to the bottom, contact me, j-tvshow.com. And, you know, we'd be delighted to get any help that we can, because there is no doubt it is a challenge, but I've also seen this remarkable, you know, growth that we've had over the last 18 months. And, you know, I think it's got a bright future.
Absolutely. One issue I want to raise, which is social media, and it's either a blessing or it's a curse.
100%.
And what I mean by that is the sense that it can be used as a vehicle for good in kind of promoting truth and you know, biblical values, or it can be used as a curse. And sadly, that in recent years, particularly because of social media, we're seeing a rise of anti-Semitism, or Jew hatred, as I like to call it, in Britain and in Europe. How has your YouTube TV channel been able to counter that rise of anti-Semitism and reassure your community and Jewish communities around the world?
I think, if anything, we've provoked anti-Semitism. I mean, if you look at some of the comments on our JTV videos, especially the political content, we get a lot of hate. There's a lot of hateful comments out there. I think there are a lot of people who are just frankly not going to convince, who are stuck in their mindsets for whatever reason. But our interest, especially in the political content, is trying to persuade the middle ground. So, you know, we've had content which is trying to explain things like why anti-Zionism is necessarily anti-Semitic. You know, we've had a Muslim Zionist on that, got a lot of you know, angry responses from Muslims on Facebook. But we also have a few people who actually are open-minded to it. Maybe they do change their mind. It's hard to know. So that's definitely interesting. I think it's very much about trying to reach the people in the middle, the people watching in the middle, and try to get them on board. Yeah.
Should we have a look at another one of Ollie's videos? And this is looking at the issue of anti-Semitism disguised as anti-Zionism.
Let's talk about anti-Zionism and why it's a form of anti-Semitism. I'm not saying anti-Zionism can cross over into anti-Semitism, or that it's often expressed in anti-Semitic language, which it is. I'm saying anti-Zionism is inherently, essentially, necessarily anti-Semitic. In fact, it's the most powerful mutation of that ancient virus today. Let's recap. Zionism is the belief that the Jewish people have the right to self-determination in the land of Israel. At minimum, and I'm being generous, it's the case that the state of Israel has the right to continue to exist. Anti-Zionism is the ideology that says Israel has no right to exist, that it shouldn't exist. It's not criticism of Israel, it's the negation of Israel. Applied practically, anti-Zionism is the movement that strives to use political, economic and moral pressure to wipe the Jewish nation-state off the map and replace it with what would inevitably be an Arab-majority Palestine. So why is anti-Zionism a manifestation of anti-Semitism? 1. Anti-Zionism seeks to forcibly dispossess Jews of a fundamental right that they already enjoy as Jews, the right to self-determination. Anti-Zionism doesn't say that nation-states shouldn't exist, it says the Jewish nation-state shouldn't exist. But Israel isn't an abstract idea, it's a real place. It's the place where Jews from around the world have resurrected their ancient Hebrew language and rejuvenated their historic, indigenous culture. Anti-Zionism says Jews alone should be stripped of their internationally recognized right to a space where their distinctive culture can flourish. That's anti-Semitism. 2. Anti-Zionism necessarily fails to treat Jews as political equals. Zionism isn't a form of supremacy, it's a demand for basic political equality for Jews as a nation. But anti-Zionism is a demand that Jews alone, having secured their national freedom, should be forcibly subordinated to other majorities. It's the demand that Jews should become permanent minorities again, despite that tragic history. Anti-Zionists tell Jews they can only be treated as equals on the anti-Zionist terms, with their collective rights revoked. It's an assertion of political supremacy over Jews. That's anti-Semitism. 3. Anti-Zionism exposes Jews to dangers for which the anti-Zionists have no answer. For millennia, the Jews have faced persecution. In the 20th century, fascist, communist and Arab regimes around the world turned on their Jews, while liberal democracies denied them safe haven. Most Jews realized that the best or only way to survive was to take responsibility for their own fate, to build their own democratic state. That's Zionism. It brought Jews to their ancient homeland from countries in which they weren't wanted. Anti-Zionism says the Jews aren't wanted in Israel either and can't be the guarantors of their own existence there. But if Israel were to disappear, the Jewish people would lose their most successful self-defense mechanism ever. Anti-Zionism necessarily disregards the beliefs, the agency and the aspirations of most of the world's Jews. That's anti-Semitism. You see, anti-Semitism was never just a prejudice against Jews like other forms of racism. It was a totalistic political ideology that mobilized societies against the Jews, that treated them as an irredeemable problem to be solved. And that's exactly what anti-Zionism is about. It's not criticism, it's a hateful, totalistic, destructive ideology. Zionism was born as a revolutionary movement to breathe life into the Jewish people. The founder of the anti-Israel BDS movement says he favors Israel's euthanasia. Choose Zionism. Choose life.
And that short video goes a long way in explaining the evils of anti-Semitism and also how this is disguised as anti-Zionism, which is anti-Semitism. How powerful have your educational videos been? Because the production value of that is excellent. It's very gripping, but also tells an audience really that there's no difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which is purely means the Jewish people have a right to a homeland in the ancient covenant homeland in the Middle East and the right to return.
Yeah, I think they've had a lot of power. I think this is the way to communicate with people now. It needs to be fast-paced, it needs to look professional, it needs to, you know, really explain things in very graphic, illustrated ways. I think this is the future, and we see it working. The interesting thing that I wanted to mention, by the way, earlier, that I just remembered when you were talking about the comments and everything, one interesting thing that we found in terms of, you know, persuading the unpersuadable, is that it might not be on the political content that people are open to being persuaded, but at least people who are entrenched in their positions on either side. But one thing I found that was interesting was there was a video that I posted about called Can We Perform Miracles, which was about Joseph, and it was like a Torah idea. Non-political, it was a theological, religious, inspiring message, short video, and I saw it being shared by a Facebook page, Free Palestine. I said, this is so inspiring, this is great. And it was just very interesting to see, you know, that maybe I could use a sort of the Jewish angle rather than focusing on the political stuff to actually build bridges. And I thought that was quite an interesting, and it was very interesting for me to see that.
Should we have a look at this one now?
Yeah, take a
so
look.
This one, let's have a look at this video, which is called Can We Perform Miracles Today?
There's a Jewish principle that whenever a unique word is repeated in the Torah, it means there is a connection between the two events. One of the most interesting places in the Bible where this principle occurs is in the story of the splitting of the sea. Imagine for a moment you were there with the Jewish people at the moment when the sea split in front of them. Imagine the Egyptians were chasing after you and the sea is in front of you and there's literally nowhere to run. And at the moment where all seems lost, the sea suddenly splits before your eyes. What kind of reaction do you think you'd have? I mean, you probably would just be like, wow. After all, this is considered to be one of the greatest miracles recorded in the Bible. But have you ever actually asked yourself, what is it that constitutes a miracle? What makes something miraculous for us? For us, something miraculous, something incredible, is when nature does something very unusual, when physical nature doesn't follow its nature. That is a miracle in our eyes. Now, hold that thought for a moment and have a look at this. It says something very interesting about the splitting of the sea in Psalms, something which we recite in the Hallel prayer. In describing the sea splitting, it says that the sea saw and fled, vayanos. Now that's a rather peculiar way of describing the event. What does it mean that the sea fled? Well, you know, there actually happens to be one other place in the entire Bible where this word fled, vayanos, appears. It's in the story of Joseph. When Joseph was sent down to Egypt by his brothers, he became a slave for the aristocrat Potiphar. And Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him. Now, one thing you need to know about Joseph is that he was a very, very good-looking guy. The Torah commentaries say he was actually so good-looking that women would throw their jewelry at him just so he would look at them. I mean, personally, I actually can kind of relate to this a little bit, but that's not the point. So one day, the house was empty, and Potiphar's wife was putting immense pressure on Joseph to have an affair with her. The temptation to give in was reaching a boiling point, and the verse says, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me, and she gets right to the point. And he left his garment in her hand and fled, vayanos, and went outside. Again, we have this word, vayanos, Joseph fled. So why is the splitting sea described as fleeing the same way Joseph is described as fleeing? What's the connection? Well, we explained before that in our eyes a miracle occurs when physical nature doesn't follow its nature. But have you ever considered what makes something miraculous in the eyes of God? What makes something miraculous in the eyes of heaven? What makes God say, wow, that is awesome? The manipulation of nature is not really impressive for God. That's easy business for him. In the eyes of heaven, a miracle isn't when physical nature goes against its nature. It's when human beings go against their nature. And that is exactly what Joseph did. Just as the sea fled, going against its normative physical nature and creating a miracle, so too, when Joseph fled from Potiphar's wife, he went against his nature and created a human miracle. When God sees a person overcoming his negative urges, which is in his nature, now that's impressive. In fact, the Talmud says you should have seen the commotion in heaven when Joseph did what he did. Every time we choose to fight being lazy, getting angry, or succumbing to our desires, and overcome these natural inclinations, we perform a miracle. Every time we push ourselves and choose to overcome what is easy and do what is right, that is a miracle in spiritual terms. Every time we choose to be loyal to our friends, rather than to climb that social ladder, or to give that little bit extra to charity, or whatever it is, we go against the natural order of doing what's easiest. And that is a pretty rare thing. What does it mean when it says that the sea saw and fled? What did it see? The Talmud says that the sea metaphorically saw the coffin of Joseph being held as they were all standing at the sea. And the sea, so to speak, remembered how Joseph fled from Potiphar's wife. And in the merit of one of the greatest human miracles performed by Joseph, God responded by performing one of the most supernatural miracles ever, splitting the sea. You know, the word for a miracle in Hebrew is a nes, and the Hebrew word for a moral challenge is nisayon. It derives from the same root because the concept is the same. A miracle is about embracing a challenge and going against our nature. The Talmud asks, who is strong? The answer is powerful. He who overcomes his desires. The real test of strength and character isn't found in the gym, it's found in the arena of human choices.
Very profound. I love Jewish wisdom. Very impressed with that. I was absolutely gripped by that video. That was very deep and very theological, but very insightful as well. I very much enjoyed that.
Thank you.
So, yeah, you're quite the rabbi.
Well, yeah, that was actually something that it was a lesson that was taught to me when I was in Israel. I just remember that really stuck with me. It really kind of pierced my heart. So, yeah, wanted to share it.
I'm going to ask you something in terms of theology, really, particularly from your Jewish perspective. Where do you think we are in terms of Jewish history?
Where are we in terms of Jewish history? Well, we're near the end of Jewish history, I suppose. You know, Jews believe that, you know, if we kind of take a step back, 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people were exiled by the Romans. We're still technically in that exile. And our ambition has always been to return back to the land, and eventually we want to see a Messianic era. There's a tradition that believes that that has to take place by the year 6000 in Jewish history. You know, we're nearly there. It's a couple of hundred years away maximum, but we hope it's going to happen before then. I mean, Jews have always been yearning for the Messianic era, but we know that we can't be far away, and there are definitely signs and you know, events that have happened that clearly indicate that we're nearing that stage, such as, you know, I think the Holocaust and the rebirth of Israel, two absolutely major, fundamental events that happened not just in Jewish history but world history, you know, and only a couple of years apart. And yeah, I think we're definitely in momentous times. The other interesting issue that's happening, of course, is you know, throughout Jewish history, we've had every sort of big force or political ideology or religious ideology that comes, they always have some kind of interaction, often negative interaction with Jews. They've got a problem with the Jewish people for whatever reason, whether it's the Romans, the Greeks. It was, you know, there were problems with the Catholic Church at one point. You had, you know, the Nazis, and you know, recently today we see there's a problem with Islamic extremists. And there's an interesting train of thought in Jewish philosophy as to what's going on here. We consider Arabs and Muslims to be descended from Ishmael, who was Abraham's first son. That's also what Muslims consider to be. They consider themselves to be descended from Ishmael. And there's an interesting tradition in the biblical commentaries that there's going to be bit of a conflict and disagreement between some people within the descendants of Ishmael and the Jewish people. There's plenty of points I can bring up to discuss that. You know, there's specifically with regard to there's going to be some kind of tension in the land of Israel. We know that there's definitely a link in the Bible between circumcision and that providing the merit or the right to live in the land of Israel. And we know that the only other people that also circumcise themselves, not exactly in the same manner, are Muslims. So there's clearly a link between that and the land of Israel at a very philosophical level. But also the Talmud says, why was he named Ishmael? Ask the question, why was he named Ishmael? And the reason given is that the name Ishmael means God will hear. Now, one reason is because Ishmael's mother, Hagar, cried out to God when she thought she was going to die and her son was going to die, Ishmael, in the desert. And God heard her cry and thus named her. And Ishmael certainly is named after the power of prayer. And we know that certainly that is something that I think Muslims would agree is a key tenet of what they do in their faith. Prayer is a really important part of what they do. But the Talmud also says that why is he called Ishmael? Because it's future tense, God will hear. And it says that God will hear the cries of the Jewish people when some of the descendants of Ishmael attack, persecute, and terrorize the Jewish people. And God will hear the cries of the Jewish people. And what I think is going on is that what we have today with radical Islam, and I'm sorry this is a slightly elongated answer, but I think it's important to understand this. The issue with radical Islam is different from all other nations and empires that have persecuted the Jewish people throughout history. Why? They're different because this is an ideology this time. It's a religious ideology that is not centered around a particular land or nation or empire. And therefore it's much harder to defeat. It's something that we today don't know how are we going to deal with this. How can we deal with people who are willing to, they can pop up all over the world, they're willing to die for their beliefs. They're willing to die. They're willing to. They're interested in. They can sacrifice themselves. And also, we have this Israel-Palestinian conflict, and there's no doubt that the leadership up until this time has been fueled by people who just, I think, on a religious level, will not accept a Jewish state that was once inhabited by Muslims. And so we live in a time where we're dealing with people who are unwilling to compromise, and people who and we can be attacked in any place at any point in Israel or throughout the world. And so I think the idea of this, on a philosophical level, is that the only solution ultimately, people talk about two-state solution and stuff, there really is no clear solution, unless Muslims change their theology, which is something out of our control. There is no solution. The only thing one can do, and what one does when they're squeezed and they're pushed to the brink, is to turn upwards.
Absolutely.
And thus it says God will hear the cries, because eventually the idea is to make the Jewish people realize that ultimately, more than, it's not the IDF that's going to save us. It will be God. And so the idea is that these difficulties that we face as a people will force us to turn upwards and recommit ourselves to trusting in God. And I think that's effectively what we're seeing is taking place, and that is what will be the precursor, and that was what hopefully will lead us into a Messianic world where you have the entire world recognizing and connected to and having a relationship with God.
Absolutely. When we look at some of the prophecies relating to the return of the Jewish people and the re-establishment of the State of Israel through the prophets such as Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and others, don't you think we're actually living in extraordinary times? That Israel itself is a modern miracle. The fact that here we have a reborn Jewish state that was born in one day, surrounded by 5 Arab armies at its inception. The New York Times gave Israel a week. US intelligence didn't think that this new Jewish state would last more than 1 week. And yet here we are, Israel's approaching a 70th anniversary, faced 5 major wars during that time, won them all, and literally is a beacon of light in a very, very dark region, but now economically is competing with many European states as leading the world in terms of startup nation, technology. Doesn't this say that something very, very special is happening in the land with the Jewish people?
I mean, David Ben-Gurion, who was Israel's first prime minister, a secular guy, said in Israel, to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles. Look, I think any objective historian or observer could see that Israel has survived against all the odds. Now, look, I think it's very dangerous to be complacent and to think, Israel's set and it's all going to be fine, it's all going to be good. Who knows what could happen in the future? I don't even know whether this, God forbid, but I don't know whether the state is necessarily going to survive and it will just slowly, we'll all be sort of, it'd be a nice transition into the Messianic era in the religious level. I don't know, there could be huge turbulence. But what I do know is that up until now, there has been this remarkable survival. I mean, a lot of people after the 1967 war really kind of changed their entire perspective of things and really became, a lot of people became religious and more observant and believing in a higher power after the 1967 war. But, you know, there have been real difficulties since that point. So it certainly hasn't been plain sailing, but there is no doubt that Israel sort of is like a symbolic in many ways of actually how the Jewish people have guided themselves throughout history, which is to be small, to be surrounded by enemies, to be few in number, to be sort of a massive collaboration of all different ethnicities and nations come together, and trying to make an important contribution to greater society. And I think Israel's certainly done that.
What role do you think Christian Zionists can play, and particularly our wonderful viewers who have a love for Israel and the Jewish people?
What role can they play? Well, you know, I was actually at the Balfour 100 celebration at the Royal Albert Hall a few weeks ago, and it was a Christian Zionist event. I have to say, it was so overwhelming to see the amount of love and dedication towards the Jewish people and Israel. I mean, it was genuinely one of the most profound experiences of my entire life. It felt quite Messianic, actually, you know, to see non-Jewish people so loving towards the Jewish people and towards Israel. I mean, I think this is actually this is unprecedented in many ways. You know, we've never really seen this throughout our history. Seen a group of people that have actively said, you know, I would say certainly in the case of Western democracies, Britain, America, Jews have felt they can be at home there. But this active love towards us, and to saying, you know, and also insisting that, you know, we're not demanding anything of you. We don't need you to convert or anything else. We just love you as you are, and, you know, we support you. It was really so overwhelming. What would I say Christian Zionists can do? Look, it's important to, I think, you know, try and influence your communities, be active, engage. Often Jewish people, you know, need to be reminded of their of the beauty of their heritage. You know, unfortunately to say, so, and it often can mean more to them when they hear a non-Jewish person saying it to them. So that's important. And also, you know, look at Jewish and Israel causes and find ones that speak to you, find ones that you think can help to ensure the continuity and health of the Jewish people. It's certainly one thing I would do. I would welcome any support for my channel and what I'm trying to do. But find one that speaks to you, I guess.
I'll tell you a little story which was really quite remarkable. I attended the first Christian Media Summit in Jerusalem back in October. And this is the first time the Israeli Foreign Ministry, the Israeli government press office had organised a conference for Christian broadcasters around the world. And what was extraordinary is that our presence being there reminded some of these Israeli leaders that of the Bible, but also it was a reminder of who they are. And they reminded us of our responsibility to you, because without the Jewish people, we wouldn't have the Ten Commandments, we wouldn't have the prophets, we wouldn't have the Bible, and ultimately for us, we wouldn't have our Messiah. So, and that through our Messiah is where we have it. Of course. Of course we would.
Bagels a Jewish invention. But they are. Even if they weren't, we took them over.
But what I'm trying to say is that aren't we living in a kind of unique time, in the sense that barrier of separation between Jews and Christians that have been up there for centuries, and the last decade or so has come crumbling down. And there's so much now support amongst Christians and Jews working together in defence of our Jewish heritage, but also in defence of Israel and the Jewish people.
Without a doubt. And as I say, just going back to that experience I had at the Royal Albert Hall, it was just a remarkable experience. You know, things really are shifting and changing. You know, from a theological perspective, we consider the Jewish people as descendants of Jacob, and we consider the sort of the Christian European Western world to be descendants of Esau. And what's interesting is that whilst they have strife throughout a lot of their lives, at the end of their life they sort of reconcile and they kiss each other and hug each other. And Jacob thinks Esau wants to kill him, but at the end they reconcile. And I think that we're sort of seeing that, we believe that the actions of our forefathers are sort of prototype for how history will manifest. I've spoken about that before with Ishmael and how it relates to world events today. And I think that that might be symbolic of what's happening today between the Jewish and the Christian worlds. We're starting to, Jacob and Esau are starting to embrace each other.
And I think the reason is because we, Christians for the first time, for certainly over 2 centuries, are now finding themselves in a minority. Because in the Western world, we're living in a kind of post-Judeo-Christian heritage, increasingly secular, increasingly atheist society. And we're finding now that Christians are being discriminated for praying at their workplace, for wearing a cross, things that we took for granted, we now no longer take for granted. So we're now finding our place now where if we believe in the Word of God, that means that we are then in a collision course with society as a whole.
100%. The dominant religion of our time now is secularism. And you're right, even if, Christians are in a minority, even if they might not necessarily be so in terms of their numbers, they might still have quite big numbers. In terms of the dominant ideology of the time, certainly religion and belief in God and all that, these kind of things they're frowned upon and looked down upon and seen as superstitious and irrational, without a doubt. And so I do think that the more people of faith, and I find the word faith I have a bit of a difficult time with it because I don't think it's irrational. Faith implies belief in something without evidence. Jews certainly don't subscribe to that. The word for faith in Hebrew is emunah, which actually means faithfulness. We believe you can get truth. The question is, are you going to be loyal to that truth? I can know that smoking's bad for me, but I can still do it because I have drives that want me to, so the question is, are you going to be loyal to the truth? I don't smoke, by the way, don't worry, Mum. And so that is, I think, the challenge of our time, and I think people of faith, people that believe in the God of Abraham, should start working together, start uniting together, start trying to propagate and work on propagating these values that we have in common.
Let's have a look at another one of Ollie's videos, and this stars Jonathan Farrell from Stand With Us, who was recently on the Middle East Report, essentially stating why I am a Christian Zionist.
This year is the 100-year anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. 100 years since Lord Arthur Balfour, who, as a Christian, stood courageously in front of the Zionist Federation proclaiming, I am a Zionist. I too am a Christian Zionist. And with good reason. The Bible mentions the word Israel alone approximately 2,500 times. Almost every page of the Old Testament is speaking, in one way or another, about the nation of Israel. Indeed, the land of Israel is of undeniable centrality to the context of the Gospels and the teachings found in the New Testament. Without recognizing Israel as the ancient homeland of the Jewish people, Christianity would look very different. Yet the truth of the Jewish connection to the land of Israel is subject to attack almost every day on British campuses. In a matter of months of joining university, I had experienced the intense hatred which many Zionist Jewish students were subjected to for simply defending their natural and historical rights as Jews. I listened as a staff member of the university claimed that Israel had fabricated all the archaeological evidence of Jewish heritage in the land, claiming it all as a state-propagated lie. Indeed, in many instances, I myself have received anti-Semitic insults because I chose to defend Israel's history, the truth. I couldn't remain silent, and so I, along with other non-Jewish students, founded the Exeter University Friends of Israel Society. Yet against such false claims and a record number of anti-Semitic incidents recorded on campuses across the UK last year, Christian societies have, by and large, remained silent. By making a compassionate stand in solidarity with Jewish and Israel societies across the country, Christians can help lead the change on university campuses to demystify the discussion about Israel and stand upon historical truths that our faith cannot exist without. We must not neglect the opportunity student leaders have to direct real positive change on campus. Change is possible when students are willing to work together, challenge each other, and shed our own prejudices in the hope of a more constructive dialogue on the Israel-Palestinian conflict. I long to see how great the impact might be if only more Christian students would take heed of the biblical and historical call directed to them to stand with the Jewish people as a mark of their commitment to their Christian faith of Judaic origin. I'm committed to making a change. Are you?
Excellent presentation there by Jonathan, who has recently been on the Middle East Report. We're almost coming down to the end of the programme. I'll leave 5 minutes of the programme left, and it's great to see that you know, a leader like yourself, you're in your 20s, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Coming to the fore with this fabulous channel that you produce. So not only does it have like current affairs, educating and informing people about the truth of Israel and the plight of the Jewish people, but you also are bringing deep spiritual and theological understanding as well to those who want to watch your videos. How important is it that we see the overall picture of what's going on within the spiritual context, but also standing up for Israel and the Jewish people where it counts in Parliament and in the media and in society as well?
It's a very broad question. I mean, there's tons that you can do. There's tons people can do. Whether it is the easiest things as, like, you know, sharing content, trying to start local talks or groups that can educate people and you know, inspire others. There's, you know, other ways people can help finance causes that they care about. There's a lot people can do. In terms of what you said about zooming out and seeing the greater context, that for me is absolutely key. It's always been the bread and butter of JTV. It's about getting people to, JTV for me is getting people to understand, ultimately, what does it mean for Jewish people? What does it mean to be a Jew? What are our basic beliefs? Is there, you know, rational evidence for belief in God? Is there rational evidence for divine authorship of the Torah? If there's a God, why is there suffering? If God created the world, you know, why would he do it if he has no needs? We want to, you know, we want to deal with real big fundamental issues that people, and, you know, and also issues of science and religion. We did a debate on God's existence. I really do want to deal with the fundamental big issues, because I think without them, everything else is, you know, it lacks its basic fundamental structure and foundation. So I think that those things are fundamental. I would encourage your viewers to get onto our channel, to share it. If you want to go onto Facebook, then just type in J-TV, the Global Jewish Channel. Same with YouTube. If you want to contact me to talk about maybe ways in which you want to partner with us, or you have ideas, or you want me to be able to advise you on how you can do something in your local community or something like that, I'd be delighted to speak to them. Again, the website, j-tvshow.com. So yeah, I think we live in a much smaller world today. There's so much more that can be done through the power of technology and the internet. It's much easier to change not just you know, your small community around you, but also the wider world. There's tons that can be done.
And Ollie, in terms of engaging with young people, you know, it's a brilliant platform. Have you any advice for some of our viewers in particular who have grandchildren, and do you want to tell them the message about Israel and the Jewish people?
You mean viewers that want to inspire just their grandchildren?
Precisely, yeah, absolutely.
There's a few things I would say. If you're looking for video content, if you're not going to be producing it, you want to find the right content, look for things that are short, that are punchy, fast. Young people don't have time to sit down and watch long programs and segments. They need it sharp, they need it simple. If you want to talk and educate them personally, yourself, make your points simple, clear, listen to them, respond to them, sympathise with what they're saying, and try to acknowledge what they say and have a dialogue rather than shove things down their throats. And that, I would say, that's the key thing. Also get other young people on board. If you can find young people who share your passion, or if you can find young people who you can try and persuade, and then they can join on board, then starting initiatives, educational initiatives, activism is a lot more powerful because young people respond to young people.
Absolutely. So, in the end, could this actually, JTV, become a channel in its own right on the Sky platform? And you've got 30 seconds, I'm afraid.
Maybe. I mean, I think actually the internet is the future.
Yeah.
And I think short clips are the future. I think that is the way that people want to consume their media at the time they want to, when they're ready for it. I think that is the future for us. So I don't have a particular desire for us to be online, for us to be on the Sky. I think online is key, and it seems to be working for us.
Excellent. Ollie, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest on today's Middle East Report. Been a pleasure.
Fantastic. Really good to be here.
And I just want to thank you for watching today's Middle East Report. We can learn a lot from the inspiration that Ollie has provided, particularly with his new JTV YouTube channel, which educates so many people about Israel and the Jewish people. And this is certainly a way to reach younger people through social media. So thank you for watching today's Middle East Report.
Eliel, Moshe Friedman, Living Wells, Parlez-vous français?
Yeah, Mr. Pain au chocolat. Very nice.
Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. I know you'll be alright. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. To know about the future, you have to learn the best. What's timeless through the ages is surely gonna. Eliel, Moshe Friedman, Living Wells, Parlez-vous français?
Yeah, Mr. Pain au chocolat.
Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. I know you'll be alright. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. To know about the future, you have to learn the best. What's timeless through the ages is surely gonna last. We've seen the greatest kingdoms eventually therefore. Who knew the smallest nation will live to pass them all? The more they try to make us feel the pressure, the closer it brings us together. We'll never stop, cause we are forever. Cause we are forever. Cause we are. Say it again. We've only just begun. Still here. So forget about your worries. Let go for your fears. As long as we're united, then we will still be here. The more they try to make us feel the pressure, the closer it brings us together. We'll never stop, cause we are forever. Because we are forever. Cause we are forever. Knocking at your door, and every time you offer peace they always ask for more. Now they say they want to wipe you off the map for sure. Yeah, like we haven't heard that before. In each generation another one rivals. They made blood libel since before sundials, and if you count everyone that one is dead, we'd have more than the rest of the world compiled. But they celebrate much too soon, cause you can't touch us like you can't touch the moon. And everyone that brought us misery is on the wrong side of history. You see, we're not worried and you wonder why. Well, how can you kill something that doesn't die? And even though you're gonna try, surprise, we're still alive. I'm Yisrael Chai.